Hi, welcome to Papa's Workshop. You know, some days you have bad things happen in the shop, and today was one of those days. I bought a piece of poplar from the big box store and didn't realize just how wet it was. So when I went to carve this plaque, this wood increasingly became more and more cupped to the point where it was not usable. But the good thing is I used this as a test bed for the rest of the carving and the experiments that I wanted to do to make the final version of the plaque look great. So let me show you how I did it. Let's get started. This plaque is designed entirely in easel, and it is for a customer, and you can see with the various work pieces down below that it went through a number of design changes. But in the end, the customer is thrilled to death with the way it looks. Now this is going to be carved with the letters first, and I'm using a 60-degree V-bit to be able to do the carving on this. As I began to carve this, I realized that the depth for this first line was actually too deep, and I had to stop and redo that. So that actually was the first mistake, which was my mistake alone, because I had changed the depth of cut on the entire sign, but I missed that line. So at this point, I stopped the machine and reset the depth to the correct depth and began again. Now everything looks good. It's carving very, very clean and smooth, and is carving at the correct depth. The only thing that looks bad is the letter M is far too big and it's too deep. But that's okay, because at this point I'm using this one as a test board because I'm already planning on having to remake this sign. Now this is the smaller set of letters that's actually at the bottom of the plaque, and I wanted to see how this one would carve. And actually, again, it's doing extremely well, and it's cutting very clean. The other thing that I want to be able to let you know is I am using the Auric Mask 813. Now the reason I use this masking is I had pre-finished the wood and sealed it, so it was completely finished. And the idea behind that, once I had finished carving it, I would be able to treat the letters with the paint and then peel off the masking, and my plaque would be done. Now that all the lettering was completed, I went ahead and switched over to a downcut bit to be able to do my two-stage carving and carve out the bulk of the material for this part. And for the detail pass, I switched over to a 90-degree bit to be able to clean up all the edges for this logo and also for the square section that's going to support a picture. Now I'd already said that this is a test bed for my plaque, and I realized that this was actually carving still too deep. The stars were perfect, however the logo did not have the detail that I wanted to be able to have in it because of the depth of cut. But again, this is why I did this plaque and continued on with it, even though I had some mistakes. I would rather make all the mistakes on this one rather than make the mistakes on the next plaque that I'm doing. The next major flaw you're going to see in just a moment. As it was cutting this outline, two things was happening. One, it was actually cutting deeper than what it needed to be able to cut. And the other thing, this wet wood that I really didn't realize how wet was already starting to curve. And you can see at this point that that is actually a much wider cut. And the reason being is this was actually lifting off of the table. Okay, not to be deterred, I wanted to go ahead and continue on with my test. So I painted it, and I wanted to see how the masking would do. Now this is a little splinter removal from my first aid kit that actually was an invaluable tool to be able to help get the masking away from the plaque on these very small little detail areas. And I must say, this Auric Mask 813 worked extremely well. So this was a very, very successful portion of my test. And I highly recommend using the Oramask 813. And I do have a link in the description down below where you can order this. So if you're using anything that needs masking, whether it's on wood or have you seen before on the PVC, this works extremely well. And it does make the painting much, much easier. Now I also wanted to see how the stars look painted, and actually I did not like that. It was not bright enough for me. The red, I wanted to see how that worked over the sealer, which actually did quite well. Now I did spray this with the Rust-Oleum 2x clear gloss, and I ended up having one problem that I wanted to be able to show you. The red actually bubbled up because it was still just a little bit wet. And the other thing that happened, when the drying process, this is where the wood with the wetness really started to curl up. Okay, now that I've got all the experiments out of the way, we're going to start doing the real one with a piece of oak wood. Now that I have the tape down where it belongs, I'm going to go ahead and use the Starbond super glue and be able to put that onto my tape. And I'm just going to flip it over now and put it in place. The only thing that I'm going to do is just bring up the bump stops to be able to help hold it in place should it get quite a bit of movement. And I don't think that it will. This is just a little added safety precaution. The glue and the tape method holds extremely well. This is the carving that we're going to be doing today. And the first thing I want to do is plane the surface completely smooth. And to do that, what I'm doing is adding a new workpiece over here. And the work area itself, as far as the size of the material, is 13 by 11. And all I want to be able to do is create a box that's a little bit larger that will be able to cover the entire thing. So what I did is I set up a rectangle that was 14 by 12. So that's actually going to cover the entire surface. The next thing that I want to be able to do is set that where it's centered on the material. And now this box, I'm going to zoom out, completely covers the material itself. As far as the depth of the cut, I want to take very small pass, and I'm going to cut 0.04 of an inch deep. Now if we look at this over here, I have a custom bit that's set up that's 3/4 of an inch, and the cut settings that I'm going to have is I want to be able to cut on the rasper, and I want to be able to have that go left and right, and that will cut with the grain of the wood. The next thing that I want to do, I know that I'm cutting 0.04 deep. So on this depth per pass is 0.028, and that's actually good because that will give me one pass to cut and then a second pass basically to clean up everything. So those are the settings that I'm going to be using. So now I want to go ahead and set up the machine to be able to carve this. The next thing that I want to be able to do, because this is actually over my XY0 point down here, I actually want to move this to the center and use it where my XY0 point is going to be in the center. So I'm going to set that right here to be able to identify that point. And then I'm going to change my x-axis to 0. And I'm going to change the y-axis to 0. And now that puts it into the center. And that way when it carves, it will carve the entire surface all the way out to the edges. The other thing that I want to look at that we haven't talked about is up under the machine is the step over. And if I click on the machine and then I go down to the advanced, you'll see the step over is 40%. That means it's going to step over 40% of that bit. The bit's 3/4 of an inch wide, so that's actually going to work out well. I'm not going to change that. But I have had a lot of people ask. So it could be changed, but I'm choosing not to. But that's where you can find it. The safety height is also 0.15 of an inch. That is the default setting. And because this is a flat surface, I don't need to change that. I want to identify the center point of my work area. And that's where I'm going to be placing my bit from my router over this center point. So what I can do now is go ahead and hit carve. And I can actually move this down to this point. As the CNC router begins the operation, it actually moves over to the bottom right hand corner and starts to carve. Now remember, we have the rasper setting in, so it's going to be cutting from right to left, from the bottom all the way to the top, and it's going to be cutting with the grain. While this is carving, I want to be able to take a shot of what the toolpath actually looks like on the computer screen. And you can see where it's moving left and right across the workpiece. And then you can see that actually in the operation. One thing that it does is it does move around the perimeter of the workpiece to help clean up that edge. It's a nice feature also. Okay, we now have a perfectly flat board that we can now carve on. I am going to go ahead, because oak is so porous, I'm going to go ahead and seal this wood and put a little bit of the filler into that, which is the sawdust itself. The sealer that I'm going to be using is the clear shellac. It dries very quickly. It works extremely well. Now what I'm doing, I'm putting a heavy coat of the shellac down, and then I'm just gathering up some of the sawdust and sprinkling it onto the area. And with an old credit card, I'm just working that into the little cracks that are on the oak. So it eliminates that porous wood with the sawdust filling in. And that's acting as a good filler. I'm going to continue this process over the entire surface of this wood so I can eliminate as much of the porous grain as I possibly can and seal the wood completely so it'll be a smooth surface to work with. The only good thing about that is I had enough sealer on my brush that I did not have to go back into the container again. I really didn't want to do that. Okay, we're going to let that dry now for about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll be able to come back and sand it. One of the things that I want to do is use this piece of 1/2-inch plywood over here as a test bed to be able to test my 90-degree bit on the correct depth that I want to be able to have for this plaque. So what I'm going to do, I just set up a small rectangle to be able to carve, and I have the depth set for 0.03. And I want to see what that looks like. And that's all that I'm carving. That was at 0.03. And I would actually like that just a little bit deeper. So I'm going to change that to 0.05. Then I'm going to carve the same exact thing again and see what it looks like. So I think actually 0.05 looks good. So I'm going to leave it at that. Now the next thing I'm going to do, now that I have the depth set that I want, I'm going to go ahead and carve this portion of the plaque. And this is with two-stage carving. So I'm going to go ahead and use an 1/8 inch bit to do the bulk of the carving, and then I'll do the detail pass with the 90-degree bit. Now you'll notice the stars are deeper. I want those stars to go down and actually form a point. And you can see that over in the preview that that's exactly what happens. And the box itself for the picture is a little bit deeper. That's at 0.1 of an inch. And that is by design as well for the picture to be framed in that opening. Now I went ahead and installed my 1/8 inch bit. This is a down cut bit, so that's going to give a cleaner cut to do this roughing pass. This is a close-up look at the roughing pass and how it creates the stair step down. The V-bit will come back and clean that up really nice. But I wanted to show you exactly what the roughing pass looks like. Now I've switched over to the 90-degree V-bit to be able to do the detail pass, and you can see how it's cleaning it up and adding the detail into the carve. Now I've changed bits again, and I'm using a 60-degree V-bit to carve the letters. So this is the completed carve. The only thing that I've done at this point is lightly sand the surface to be able to remove all the little burrs from the carving itself. So this actually looks very nice. Now I've used this method before where the material itself is completely sealed, and all I need to do is just fill in with the black paint, and I'm using the acrylic paints for this, all of the lettering and the border around the entire project. And then all I need to be able to do is just take a damp cloth and wipe that off, and it comes out very nice and clean. And I've used this process before, and I'll put a link up top to other videos that I have done using this method. Now I chose not to use the auric mask 813 on this particular project because I was doing all the surfacing and finishing while it's still on the CNC machine. Now I only paint a little section at a time and then take a damp cloth and wipe off the excess paint. And then using the dry portion of the towel, it just cleans that paint right off, leaving the paint inside of the recessed area, and it's clean on the surface. And then I'll continue on and paint some more of the letters and repeat that same process. The next step in doing this sign is I want to put the gold leaf into these two stars to make them gold stars. And what I'm doing is just using this leaf metal, but it's really a gold leaf technique that we're going to be doing. And the first thing that I'm going to do is, after having sealed the wood, that grain of the wood has been raised up a little bit inside of these stars. So I'm just taking a regular emery board for the fingernails, and I put a point on it so I can get down deep into the stars. And all I'm going to do is just lightly sand each of these points all the way down to the bottom. And all that's going to do is just make this a little bit smoother and easier for the leaf material to be able to stick to the stars, stick to this wood. So I'm going to go ahead and take a couple minutes and do that. And then I'm going to show you the process on putting this gold leaf in. Yeah, I'm finishing up the sanding now. And that did not take long at all to be able to do. This is my last point of the second star. And then I'm just going to take the air compressor and blow this clean so there's no dust or debris in there. Now the next thing I'm going to do is use this metal leaf adhesive to be able to put down inside of this area for these stars. Now on the instructions it says to let dry for anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. And then on this package itself, under the instructions, it says let the glue dry for 10 to 15 minutes. So what we're looking for is for this glue to be tacky, not completely dry. So I want to shake this up really good. And then what I'm going to do is just use a little small paintbrush to be able to get into these stars, because I want to try to keep as much off of the surface as I possibly can, but I also want to make sure that it goes right out to the edge of this star as well, because having a nice sharp point is going to be something that's going to really set this off and make it look good. Without that, it's not going to have the look that I want to be able to create. So like I said, this does not take long, but right up to that point is what I want to be able to do. So the first star is done. Now the nice thing about this is that to clean this brush, you can actually use soap and water. If you let this brush dry, you're going to have to use a citric cleaner to be able to clean this brush. So this takes very little glue. Now also, in doing this, some people will actually use varnish to paint into this area and let it get tacky, and then put the gold leaf in there using that method. I had actually thought about that, but I decided I wanted to follow the instructions completely and use all of the proper materials. And once this is completely done, then I will seal it, and that will protect the gold leaf for years to come. And there we go. Now I'm going to let this dry for about 15-20 minutes, and we'll come back and put the gold leaf in. Now it's been a half an hour, so I'm going to go ahead and put this gold leaf into place. And one of the important things that you want to be able to do is make sure that you use the gloves, because the oils from your skin will actually make it where it will not stick properly. Now what I want to do is just use a portion of this sheet. So all I'm going to do is just take a little razor blade and cut this so that will come apart just like that. And then I can take that, I'm actually going to cut that in half again. That way I'll have one for each star. And we'll bring that over. I'll put that over the star, and I'm going to start pushing it in. Now I'm just using a regular paintbrush, but it is actually fairly stiff, and that's what I want to be able to shove it down into all of the little crevices that we need to. Is that right down at the bottom. It went ahead and tore also because this doesn't stretch. So I've got to fill in that portion. And I'm going to take that and actually put it over into the other one down at the very bottom. And when it goes down into that little tiny point, that's where it has the tendency to break off. And it's a matter of just taking your time and working with it real slow to get all the coverage that you need. Right down there at the very bottom. And now that we've got real good coverage, now it's just a matter of cleaning up the stars around this edge of it, and that will be done. Now that I've got all the edges cleaned up, I'm just going back one more time and trying to get everything sealed nice and tight. Now I'm going to take a little bit of air, very low pressure, and just blow that clear. Takes very little pressure. Yeah, I'm going to do the same thing again. I want to make sure that all of that is down tight. That looks real good. I don't know how well you can see this in the camera, but that is looking really, really good. And that's how we're going to do the gilded stars in that gold color. I'm going to let that go ahead and dry now. Come back and see if there's any other touch-ups that I need to do. That looks great. Okay, with all the carving and the painting done and the gold leaf done on the stars, all that's left now is to be able to go ahead and put the final clear coat on it. And what I'm doing is going to put on like 3 coats, sanding very lightly in between each of the coats. I am very pleased and honored to have been able to make this plaque for you, Master Stephen Grayson. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Master Stephen Grayson. And congratulations on living your dream. Hi everyone, thank you for watching my video today. If you like the video, please go ahead and hit the subscribe button down below and the little bell next to it so you'll be notified on the different videos that I upload. Also check out the videos over here to be able to stay up to date on the happenings in my shop. So again, thank you for watching my videos.